We're ready.
Okay.
Okay, call back into order, Tillamook County Budget Committee, Thursday, April 15, 2023. It's now 3:57. We have spent the last 3 days listening to department presentations to this committee regarding their requested budget for the next fiscal year, which begins on July 1 of this year. So we've heard the requests, we've discussed them, we've come up with a lot of questions, some suggestions, and I think we're at a point now where we spend a few minutes talking about what we've heard, offer some suggestions back to the county treasurer to come back with a suggested balanced budget in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks in the middle of May, and then go from there. So the first thing I'll ask all of us, and then I'm going to ask the county treasurer to give kind of a summary from her point. But let me start with the special funds. And for those listening, there are basically two kinds of funds. There are a general fund, which is where we spend most of the time and where the county commission has most of its discretion. And then there are special funds. Special funds are typically dedicated to a single or maybe multiple, but specific events or services that are provided. They have a specific source of money, sometimes several, but you really can't take money from one special fund and put it in another, nor can you put it back over to the general fund or vice versa typically. So those are pretty much in balance as we saw them. So let me ask the committee if there's any concerns or questions on any of the special funds before we get into the bigger picture and the general fund.
The TLT fund, is that's a $500,000 in the hole at this point?
Yeah, it was like 479, and I see Rachel's there if she wants to pop in. So yeah, I believe it was 479, roughly 500.
And now you're talking about 111 or 121? 111?
Let me look, because they're both TLT.
Yeah, that number is correct.
Okay.
From the numbers we have today, and we were going to update them for the May hearing, because we'll have some new revenues and more expenditures. But in general, I don't see how it's not going to be in the hole going into May, so we'll have to make some decisions.
Do we need Rachel to do anything today from this committee, or can we accept that that's the position and then balance it out in May?
I really liked Bill's suggestion about considering borrowing for that project. It makes sense to me because we know that the TLT money is coming in. If we could get a low interest loan and borrow for that project so that we don't have to lock up all of the money in the TLT fund right now and be in the hole $500,000, I don't see why we wouldn't do that.
Do we know enough, we meaning the county, does the county know enough about specific parts of the project, phases 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever, and I think that's what they were called, that you could say, okay, to fund phase 3 is X amount of dollars. And therefore, we have some money that we could allocate and we need to borrow the rest, say 50%. And then take it from there, and all of that could happen in the next 30, 60, 90 days. Are we, you county, at that point?
We are for the parking lot. I shouldn't answer for Rachel, sorry.
So Rachel, can you speak to that? Let's say we took a sum of money now, and I don't know what it would be, and then borrowed another, pick a number, $4 million, and financed over 10 years to do what we've talked about, which is save some of the cash flow that's occurring with the TLT, get the project done at current pricing levels, avoid heavy-duty price increases, and then pay back at the nonprofit rate of 5.5% or whatever it is against the prime rate. So is that something that could happen, and could that discussion continue then, Rachel?
You're mute.
You're on mute.
Yes, I think we could do that. Numbers I can tell you right now, I need about $352,000 to complete the engineering and permitting and get phase 1 construction for this fiscal year, the one that we're in. So that's not a whole lot, and we have that. And then, I would break phase 2 and 3 up. I think we could have plenty in TLT and the Fund 133 to pay for phase 2 perhaps, which should be, we should be in the middle of before we know if we get the OPRD grant. So maybe what I could bring back to you is a funding strategy that has it allocated by phase and a plan A and a plan B for if we get to 750, because that'll determine how much we would need to borrow. And we wouldn't need to make a decision on borrowing until maybe the end of the calendar year. And then I could work on what numbers we need to build in for spending authority, or maybe we do a supplemental budget or something like that. But I like where this is going.
So my question would be, I mean, we financed the jail roof. That was that was something. I'm not sure.
They'll let us finance a parking lot,
Yeah,
so maybe that's part of the conversation between now and May is it even possible to finance a parking lot?
right.
Yeah, well, we can find
Like,
out.
we
And-
did the bond for the road levy, but this is a little different.
Because
Yeah.
then we, yeah.
That'd be my only concern is figuring
By
that out,
far.
if it's
Well, you have a
allowed.
number of financing options. You can do something that I used to do in my previous life quite a bit with certificates of participation. And you pay about maybe 25 basis points more than whatever the current rate would be. And the banks or whomever has a security interest in this case, a parking lot. Or you could just borrow on the strength of the county's credit. I mean, you've got substantial, you've got $100 million, well, not, let's go back to general fund. You've got $30 million of general fund money annually, and if you committed, payments of $75,000, I think they would stand in line to lend money to the county for that type of purpose, especially a specific project. That's just my opinion, one of 6 here that you're getting, but having done this a number of times, I can tell you when PUD went out to refinance some things on transmission lines and others, there were 14 submittals from banks and lenders and others that saying, we love to lend money to local governments because they always pay back.
Yeah, and also, I think we really need to talk to Sarah more about the biological opinion and which things it's possible we simply won't be able to do if the biological opinion moves forward the way it's designed now. As of 2025, we might not be able to do the bike path. So I'd like to know that, because maybe we want to do it between now and 2025, in which case we would want to finance that. So I think we really need to have that conversation about, if we're shut down as of 2025 because of the biological opinion, what do we want to do between now and then?
That's a very fair question.
So, yeah, a couple of thoughts there on both of the points raised. I think we would have financing options available. A con to that, obviously, and this idea has come up before, is we do technically kind of have the cash to make this happen. Yes, we would need to cut in other places, but we do have the cash to make it happen. And if we're borrowing a couple of $1 million or $500,000 to make it happen, we're paying more for the project because you're paying the interest.
Mhm.
And so is that worth borrowing money to pay more for? I don't know. To Mary Faith's point, if the biological opinion is going to impact this project, I think we need to take a big step back and see if we want to do any components of it, because while we could potentially construct the bike path or the bike ped path by 2025, the purpose of the bike ped path is to connect several infrastructure points that we're developing, which is why it's at the bottom of the list, because we want to do the Webb Park piece, which we could not relocate and it could live as it is. We will have the Cape Kiwanis parking lot done, but the Jensen property would no longer be, it would be an open space that we could just, leave as an open space that we connect. but it really changes what the whole Kiwanda Corridor project is. And even if you gave me $50 million today to construct the whole thing, there's no way it's gonna be done by 2025. So just to kind of put, I like what you're thinking and trying to accomplish as much as possible, but I don't even know if I could deliver that to you. So I think it just warrants a lot more conversation in the impacts of the biological opinion for what that commentary is worth.
I agree, and yes, so I think we need to have that conversation and soon. And I wasn't suggesting that we could do it all in 2 years. I agree that that's totally impossible.
Yeah.
But if we had to piece it out, what pieces would we want to do in 2 years? And so, yes, let's start that conversation.
Yeah.
Commissioner?
So, yeah, Rachel and I talked about this, and we will have the cash available before this project is finished, because it's in pieces, and it's gonna be over the next 2 years, basically. We wanna start now, and we'll take a hiatus during the summer months when the most visitors are here. After the visitors leave, we'll restart the project, and by the next summer, the parking lot should be done. So based on that year and a half timeline, with transit lodging tax dollars still coming in, we'll have plenty of money there. The issue is moving forward from that point. And what Rachel and I talked about initially was that, at that point, we take a hiatus. We let the transit lodging tax fund build back up again. But the buy-up, yeah, that does throw a whole different spin on possibly the whole project. But our thinking behind getting the parking lot done is that in South County, we've been talking about this for 10 years. And everyone, all this money coming in with transient lodging, all the plans that we're making, we need to show the community that, this is high on our list. We need to get something done in South County. And the low-hanging fruit was the parking lot, the bathrooms, things of that nature. So that was my thinking anyway, that this makes sense, but yes, this gives us time to really look at what the buy-up might do to this entire project. But having the parking lot and bathrooms done at the Cape, I think, would be a terrific thing.
Yeah, I would agree.
And maybe sorry.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead, Rachel.
I was going to say, maybe it feels like maybe an approach we could apply here is what we're considering with the other county budgets. And I think just the general fund regarding contingency is try to build in a contingency for maybe some of the other TLT projects that we're talking about. Well, if we are really all in for the Cape Kiwanda project and the board's going to be considering the contract for that next Wednesday, there's going to have to be some concessions on the other TLT items, at least at the outset, to balance the budget. And so if some of those could be trimmed in concert with maybe a phase strategy to get to a balanced budget, but then keep, a prioritized list of other things that we want to fund in a contingency for TLT, that as revenues increase, like we really expect that they will, or the final invoices for the Cape Kiwanda parking lot construction come in fiscal year 24-25, we have some wiggle room. Because I think we do have some wiggle room, but I just can't give them to you on paper right now. And that's a conservative approach that I think we should be budgeting. But, so.
Fair.
Yeah, we've done all of this, spent all of this money on planning and planning and planning. We gotta get some,
We gotta
get some pavement on the ground.
Something on the
for
ground.
Sure.
Yes.
But I would suggest that if we're gonna have to cut anything, it would be the community grants. Because the other ones they've already been kind of spoken for and put into the plan. If it were me personally, I would increase TLT by 500,000, take 500,000 out of community grants, and then put that into a contingency, and if the money comes in, then go ahead and fund the community grants. Because that gives you the option of funding them later, just taking it out of the contingency, if TLT came in where it was.
Well, go ahead, Rachel.
I was going to suggest trimming the grants but not removing them entirely or having a grant round at the end of the fiscal year. So right now it's slated to be a fall round. So we could have it at the end of the fiscal year. My concern with removing the community grants entirely is 80%, 90%, whatever the vast majority of this entire budget is going to Pacific City. And I know why we're doing it, but it would be nice to spread it around a little bit. I already feel like there's gonna be some unfavorable response to that from other parts of the county. And so I think by continuing to have some level of funding in the community program helps buffer against that. One place that we could put in the contingency list could be some of the fairgrounds funding. Right now, they're slated to get $1 million, and that includes carryover money, which I don't know if it's realistic that they're going to spend $1 million this next fiscal year, but I understand what they're trying to do is build a reserve, which is important for some of these big projects. So if we earmark those funds that it's tagged as theirs, but it's not available, you know, we're kind of doing a shell game here, but it might be a way to make things pencil out. Another idea.
I think that's a reasonable approach. I think they have begun the electrical project, and so, you know, that is begun. And I don't know, you know, we'll know soon. You and I meet with Chris soon, maybe next week or something. So we'll know soon, like what's the soonest possible we could spend the money to do that stormwater mitigation project. That might be out there a year anyway. I don't know for sure how far out that is. And I think we could, especially if we put it in contingency, we could reasonably go to the fair board and say, hey, the $250 that you're expecting this year, we're going to put in contingency because we don't think that it's, you know, you're not going to be able to spend it immediately anyway. So, yeah. So I think that's a doable approach, and it has less. You know, it might make them nervous, but if we explain what you just said about put it in contingency because we need to balance the budget now, and you know, and the money's coming in anyway, I think there's less. It'll generate less ill will than cutting it from the community grants.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And so
And I would want to divert it all because they are finding,
Yeah.
they do have a project manager on board and they do
Yes.
have some momentum, but these projects take a lot of time. And so keeping 250 to 500,000 available over the next year, but holding off on the rest might be a good strategy.
So we need to ask Sean, can we develop a contingency for TLT dollars?
Yeah.
So they don't see a problem?
No.
Okay, good, perfect, just wanted to ask.
Well, keep in mind, the original discussion a day or two ago was if construction costs are going up at, say, 8 or 10 or 12% or whatever they are, and that's easy enough to check, and of course it changes from time to time, but if you can borrow money at 4.5% or 5% to avoid a 10% cost, then you do a little more upfront. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer in a way, but then you have the other external influences of what do you do with the money. So I guess we can continue this discussion, or you folks will take it forward and decide what you want to do, and then close it out at the budget in a month from now. Okay, we started out asking on special funds, so that was one issue. Other special funds, are there any other issues we need to talk about? Is there any that's not in balance now on anything?
Video lottery.
I'm sorry?
Video lottery
Oh,
is not in balance.
I thought it was. We have more money.
We have more money than we have expenses at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you want us to take some of that money and transfer it to the general fund?
No, there is the one transfer to DCD for the planner,
Yeah, we could add another 50 to that.
but that's not the true expense. And it's only for one planner.
Well, it's just for 1 year.
So we had beginning balance on the lottery fund from last year. So are you suggesting that we need to spend that whole thing out as
No.
opposed to leaving it as unappropriated ending fund balance? Help me understand what exactly you're asking for.
E-
Well, I
either-
didn't get that either.
Unappropriated or, yeah, if that's where we want to leave it, I'm good with that, because then it'll carry over, and when we get lean years, it'll backfill with it.
So that would be my suggestion at the moment. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
So
Okay.
just roll it forward.
yeah.
Okay, what else?
So the contingency funds, you know, it's just.
Well, and we may determine in the balancing of the budget
Yep.
with the rest of our conversation that there's a place that that belongs, but at this time, we haven't identified that.
I
And we
believe,
have, there are limitations on where we can spend it.
yes,
Yes. But there are quite a number of things it can be used for.
and I believe
Interestingly.
that's the only two that were out of, only special revenue funds that were out of
Okay,
balance.
so the rest of it, we're all, as of the moment, good because we're balanced. and-
Right.
And we're good, okay.
I think we all agree that we wanted to check with Joel or somebody about whether or not the veterans levy can be used for the memorial.
Agreed.
Nick was going to email Joel right when he left.
Great.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, for my non-legal opinion, I would agree with Mike. I think that's gonna be a tough one because levies are typically quite specific, and I
Yeah.
think of instances where organizations have been called into court because they tried something like, you know, not that it wasn't good intentions and good public policy, it just wasn't, the language in the election was too narrow.
Levies to provide services.
Yeah,
I don't think you should be using it to build a memorial.
but that's a question for council too.
Right.
Okay, so anything else, that's special funds, we'll go to general funds.
Mm-mm.
Okay, general funds, before we talk about the specifics, let me ask our treasurer if you want to make some general comments and then explain the timber, and maybe we can put that in context, and you can tell us how much we're out of balance, and then we'll go from there, and I'm sure that Commissioner Scar would like to talk more about contingencies, which I think makes a whole great deal of sense.
Yeah, so new philosophy going forward is, it seems like a lot of different departments put contingencies or padded their departmental budgets, and then there's also contingency with the general fund, which is meant to cover those overspent line items, should they actually go over their actual expenditures. I've started to do a once through to see historically, looking back 10 years, if it's just a line item that's there to be there, and they've never spent any funds out of it, to remove those, to see how much I can come up just with funds that are in departmental budgets that have, I hate this, have always been there because that's the way it's always been done.
They've
Um,
never used it, right?
That's never been used, no. We started, what else? Hold on one second. Get what I wrote out.
Have those sums of money actually materialized? In other words, if they based it on projected revenue, did the revenue, general fund revenue materialize so that they were actually, the money was actually there?
Some of it not, no. So it just didn't get spent. So you didn't spend the expense, but you didn't spend the revenue. You didn't receive the revenue either.
So the revenue, it just accrued into the next year, rolling forward into the next year's beginning balance?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And again, the problem with that is that we have to balance our budget
Right,
every year.
right.
So
You-
if
yeah.
we can take those out and put them in.
No, I
leave them in-
understand, that makes perfect sense. If you've got a contingency of 5 million and then a bunch at 50,000 or whatever, take those, move them over here, you got 6 million, same thing.
Balance the budget.
The budget's balanced, we're
Yep.
done, right?
Yeah.
And we're done, that's right.
No.
All right, go ahead.
So we're trying to look at general fund sustainability. We've done a deep dive. I started, my wonderful chief deputy finished, I don't do graphs, but she does lovely graphs, and has been able to provide some information. We're trying to look at operating ratios and the use of the beginning fund balance. The current requested budget has operating expenses at 1.36% of operating revenue. What might look like a solid budget this year may hurt us 2 years further down the road. We have a history of being reactionary with timber cycles as they go, They go up and down. It seems like when they go down, we put on the brakes. When they go up, we spend rather than save. And we're trying to look ahead and what's coming up, so we don't have to apply the brakes as reactionary, but slowly. General fund expenses that have outgrown reliable general fund revenue, and without the luck of 2 record-breaking timber revenue years, we could not have been able to reach the level of spending that we have. We are at our highest FTE that we have been in several years. Around 20 million with a 4% average growth is our reliable operating revenue. The question is, how do we bring our expenses in line with that number, or how do we grow that revenue? Yay. So you want to explain your graph, because she ran with it. And
So the graph in front of us is a projection based on current revenues and expenditures for this fiscal year. The first column is this current year, 22-23, projected out for the full fiscal year. Then we took our trends in revenue and expenses and pushed them forward to 24 through 26 fiscal years. And we tried to break out beginning fund balance, operating revenues, and our operating expenses. This is all just for general fund, and what that looks like rolling forward with our current staff levels, trend levels, and revenues. And so the red line is our minimum beginning fund balance, knowing that we are heavily taxed revenue based. We have to have 4 months of operating revenue at the beginning of each fiscal year to continue July through October operations before tax revenue comes in. So that's our beginning fund balance, and that gap between the green area and the red line is what we have to maintain.
Sorry.
So the gap is the number you've entered in the white box.
Operating loss.
Not quite. So that operating loss is actually where the expense columns go above the green area. That green area is our revenue. Our columns are stacked expenses in different categories. Blue is personnel, orange is materials and services, yellow internal transfers, and there's a tiny gray for capital outlay in there.
What this is also representing is we did an analysis and look back at our timber revenue for 15 years.
Yes.
15 years, and came up with an average of 4.5. I think that's high. But we have 4.5, which is in our budget currently now. Our goal is, if you see the start green in fiscal year 23-24, what that is a transfer into the Revenue Stabilization Fund to get that fund to that 4.5 million, so that when we don't have a good timber year, it doesn't hit just our minimum, meaning we're not changing the projected timber revenue every year. It's staying flat at 4.5. We may need to borrow some of that revenue stabilization to backfill to get to that 4.5
In bad years.
in bad years.
And that's the same philosophy as our contingencies, basically. So we're just leveling out the timber revenue. When timber revenue is good, should it go above 4.5 million, then we put that in revenue stabilization. And we continue on, and then in years that it's bad, below 4.5, we have the revenue stabilization fund to take out of should we need it. So it really does make a lot of sense. And I think we should have been doing this for a long time.
And I think we were headed there. You know, this was started before I got here. The Revenue Stabilization Fund was being built. I think what we've done is we've just taken the next logical step, which is to say, when you look at a 15-year horizon, what's the average timber revenue that we've gotten? 4.5. So that's the number we're now going to use. And I know it makes Sean cringe, but you've got to use something. So that's the number we're going to use and assume for each year is that 4.5, and assume that by having that amount in the bank, we can weather the ups and the downs. I think the other piece of this, you know, we've been building a beginning fund balance over the last 8 to 10 years. I think I'd have to go back and look, but the gray that you see above all of the pretty colors and above that minimum balance line, that's what we're carrying right now in our beginning fund balance. And if you start in year 22, 23, What happened to us this year, you'll see that's the only year that timber revenue shows us less than 4.5, because this year our expectation is that we will get 3. So what you see in this year is timber revenue only at 3, and you see that our expenses exceed, and we ended up with a $1.7 million expected operating loss this year. That means that we're gonna take a bite of $1.7 million out of that beginning fund balance this year
So the
when we end the year.
11.6 actually decreases by the 1.7, right?
Correct.
Okay, got
So
it.
then you see in year 22, 23, the dark green, as Sean indicated, that we're gonna pull that out of the beginning balance and put it in revenue stabilization for uses needed. We're gonna plan on 4.5 for timber revenue. All the rest of our expenses are increasing at the estimated amount for what we think we will come up with in both the world at large for CPI and what we think we will come up with in our bargaining process. And you can see at the end of next year, we will have a loss again, $1.1 million. Another bite out of beginning balance. And you see we move on to 24, 25. Again, our expenses are increasing, and those are expected, step increases for staff, expected CPI for general expenses out there. And you see we now take a bite out of our beginning balance of 887,585. So we're just under $1 million that we're taking from the beginning balance. Here's where it gets scary, is in 25, 26, you see that we've continued along, assuming we have stable timber revenue. We've continued to increase our expenses by CPI and what we expect would be in our union contracts. We now have used up all of the beginning balance we had that is above our minimum. So this is kind of just the scary picture that we're looking at as we sit and make the budget today. And the reason that you certainly are hearing us talk about no new employees, because new employees are a commitment for the future as well as a commitment to current service. It's not that we don't appreciate that we want to provide more services. We're just looking at what we think is a realistic picture here that says, just to get to the end of year 25, 26, it's a good thing that we happen to have the beginning balance we do, because we're going to spend $4.5 million just to stay at the size we are and provide services out into the future with our employees continuing to have the growth they have and the CPI having the growth we expect. Sorry, Sean, I did it again. Sean always
Okay.
starts and I always finish.
So one of the things, one of the reasons that we haven't put more into the stabilization fund early on was the fact that we kept having things blow up here at the courthouse.
Right?
The boilers, because we hadn't kept them up. We
Yep.
had to do the whole outside of the building because it hadn't been kept up. Just one thing after another.
Yeah.
I think most of the problems have been caught up. Heaven help us if we get another cyber attack that costs us another $600,000. But those things all hit in there when we could have been putting that money away.
Yep.
So I think this is a great plan. I think that seeing how this is working, and then at some point, that gives us a little time to plan out putting together some sort of a committee to look at a property tax increase for the sheriff's department, or somehow to get some additional funding to keep us going.
Agreed. Yeah, we absolutely have to generate more revenue, or within, just a few short years, we'll have to look at cuts.
So there's only one green bar, and that's the current year. And then it goes the other way. The Commissioner, I'm looking at you. On the forest side of it, you're probably the acknowledged go-to person on forest in our county right now. With the new adjustments that are being made and all, is this realistic that we keep it 4.5, or would that, do you think that's a fair number?
Over the time period that we're looking at, through 25, 26, with an increased revenue stabilization fund, yes, I think I'm very comfortable with this. But once this HCP goes into effect, if it should in '25, then all bets are off. That's why I feel it's really important that we do get that grant writer, start looking for areas of funding for all of our departments, sheriff's office included. I mean, there are grants out there that we're not looking at, which is sad. We need to be looking at those. I'm not quite as pessimistic as Sean is for the upcoming year.
I'll explain.
No.
When you're done.
And-
When you're done.
That's fine, that is fine, because I think this also is a terrific plan, I do. Am I confident that we can get through 2025, 26? By that time, it's gonna be, we'll know exactly what's gonna be happening to timber revenue. Right now, it's still kind of up in the air, because we're still fighting this HCP and this IP, and there are a couple things I can't talk about, because there are additional lawsuits going on possibly. Yeah, I think for this time period, again, I think we're good. At the end of this time period, we'll know and we can readjust.
Well, and that's the thing, this is really, we're really only talking 3 years, and actually the one you're doing now, so you're only looking at doing this twice more
Yeah.
before, and I see this as a work in progress.
Yes.
I would
It
almost
is,
bet you
yes.
10 to 1 that these last 2 blue bars, at least the last one, will change when you
Yep.
get that far into it. But
Yep.
there's just too many unknowns, and you know, I think to try and predict what goes on over there in Salem is a fool's errand.
Yep.
And has been for quite some time.
Exactly.
And so you do, what Tillamook County, like most local government, has the luxury, if you call it that, of doing a budget every year. These guys do it every 2 years. And in a way that helps us, local government, because you can adjust much more quickly, much more nimble than having locked into a 2-year thing. And you don't have anything like the kicker and all those other restraints that are here. What Tillamook County doesn't have, and I was encouraged to hear today some more talk about some kind of a special levy for the sheriff, or some other means of asking voters, have we earned your support enough to do this and that, and see what they say. And you know, this is a good start, and some of the other things, and I think you've got some wonderful people here that have a story to tell, but, you know, I've done this more than once, and, you know, trying to talk the voters into opening their wallets, that's a tough one.
It's not easy.
Not easy.
And I think that's why we wanted to make sure we knew our story really well before we
Right.
asked the voters to open their wallets.
Yep.
Because there certainly has been, you know, the sheriff has brought forward desire to come up to do a levy, and we've just said, we're not quite there yet, because if we go out today, I fear that we will be the same fate as what happened in South County 2 times when you went for a special.
Well, actually 3, but.
3 times?
Yeah, two times it was on the ballot, and voted down both times, and we had enough sampling that we thought it was gonna be like 60-40, and I thought, well, maybe 55-45, and it failed, you know, the 40-60, the other ways. So you never know till people get in, you know.
And actually vote, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and so I think that's part of why we felt like we needed to really dig in. We do have a consultant coming in, the budget's in Sean's budget, to come in and take this work that we've done and work with us and make sure that we've got it right, make sure that we really understand, and then help us do some longer term planning, because we need potentially some kind of a tax levy for this, whether everyone's calling it a sheriff's levy because he's brought it forward, and maybe that's the right focus that the community would go for, we don't know. We also have the radio project, and we're gonna need to fund that radio project, which is likely gonna be another ask of the voters. You know, and we don't know what else is bubbling in other districts, and so we'll be doing some research around that as well, so that we are trying to lay out a plan that says, because we're gonna need a road bond in the next 10 years too, right? So we have a lot of things that we're probably gonna be having to ask the voters for, and how do we lay out a strategy if it's gonna take us 2 or 3 years to get the general fund tax levy passed, and then another 2 or 3 years to get a radio levy passed? I mean, what's our strategy overall, and how are we gonna keep trucking along? So we're definitely trying to get some expertise on board to help us with that piece of it. But in the meantime, I think as we look at this budget, our goal right now is not to grow. And that's really hard, because we don't, you know, you hate to not give everybody everything they ask for, but our goal is not to grow, because the worst thing we think can happen is we grow, and then in 2 years, we have to start making significant
You can't pay
cuts.
for it. That's right.
We can't pay for it. So we might be able to stretch this out a little further if we're just really cautious about our growth and focus more on how do we get to the efficiencies, how do we really support the staff we have in the best possible way to do the most they can do with the tools that help them, you know, some of the things that are one-time bites of the apple.
So,
So Sean, you were gonna say something about this, right?
yeah, going down, I'm gonna try, we'll see if this works. In the back of your book,
Work.
oh, you have it.
For you.
For you, in the back of your book, this is the projection I received from ODF.
Timber.
And I'm trying to throw up the one I got last year at this time, which is what the county based its budgets on, all the other taxing districts that receive funds.
Is it this one?
No, it's this one.
This guy here, yeah, okay. Go ahead.
I wish it would come up on the screen. David, you can see total, they said we were gonna get, the county was gonna get $24 million
Yep.
to distribute. We definitely have not gotten that, and I don't see it coming in at the end of this month when we'll get our last distribution. The projection I got from them this week said we were getting 28 million. How am I supposed to trust their projections when they can't even meet last year's? And to try and build a budget on,
What did they tell you when you asked them? Or did you?
I don't think I've ever gotten a response back from Kevin.
They will not tell you exactly
They-
what they plan on cutting and where, and it's,
They blame it. There was one, because I listened to the State Forestry Advisory Committee, and I got kind of an O when I introduced myself, which was pretty funny. There was the fact that one of the biggest loggers in Tillamook County closed their doors. There was the weather. There was several reasons. That meeting that I listened to, there was an elephant in the room, and everybody was like trying to walk around it multiple times. I think it might have been Stimson I heard say, so you're going to have to go back to the legislature with your hand out because this is not sustainable, and nobody would say yes or no. So it's really hard for me to trust their projections and try and base a budget. I know 4.5 looks good, but it makes me nervous.
But then we will have 4.5 in the bank to carry us through so that we can continue to
Yeah.
budget at the 4.5. And when it's better, we'll hang on to it and or do special one-time projects that will increase our efficiencies, right? I think that's the other piece of this, is if we consider that timber at kind of that stable level, we're gonna, then, we're not necessarily gonna save everything. We may be doing some improvement.
The other thing to consider with the timber is we had 2 record years,
Mhm.
big record years. If you take those out, it's only 4.3,
4.2.
4.2.
okay.
So at
what-
some point, we might have to lower the 4.5.
So if you take out the 2 worst years, what is it? My glass is half full.
I like the way you think, though. So it is my hope that the projection that we just got from the Department of Forestry does come true.
Yes, we would get,
Because then we can throw a lot more money in the
Revenue stabilization.
revenue stabilization fund. and
Better known as
that
rainy
could-
day.
That could push us off, push this off even another year or 2.
Right.
Before we really have to be concerned. Because I know what they're thinking, and their thinking is correct. When the timber sale is sold, they've got 3 years to harvest it. Well, we did have a problem last year
Start turning them
when
on.
Fallon closed the stores. So there's a couple years of timber sitting out there. But when that was let, when those sales were let, timber prices were up here. You look at that today, timber prices are down here. So even though they've got another couple of years, are they gonna wanna cut it when the timber prices are here and they paid up here?
Hang on.
They're gonna hang on to it, and they can go to the department and get an extension on their contract too. So it's all juggling
Yeah.
balls up in the air. It is.
A couple months ago, Kate Skinner came, and she was pretty optimistic for Tillamook County
Who
specifically.
is she?
She works for ODF. She's the district
District
recorder in
recorder.
Tillamook.
Okay.
And she was pretty optimistic for the future in Tillamook County specifically, because she said that even if there are some losses in timber harvest in Tillamook County due to the HCP, that we have the ability to cut Swiss needle cast timber, and also we have the ability to cut alder. And so she thought that that would offset any potential losses. So she saw Tillamook County timber revenue as stable in the near future. So I hope that's true, and I trust Kate. You know, obviously, you know, she's not in charge of what goes on in Salem, but I came out of that meeting feeling like, oh, we're compared to some other places, we're in pretty good shape.
So Swiss needle cast, it's a tighter log because it's been infected and you don't get as much with it. Plus also the big chunks of Swiss needle cast are north of us, and the Rockaway block is privately owned, it's not state. There's a whole bunch of private property that we wouldn't get any piece of that has Swiss needle cast on it.
I think she was talking about you know, state.
Forest stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it still is an unknown for us, but what we do know is this last year was very hard on us. We, with inflation, like everyone else, we have dealt with inflation. We gave our staff 5%, which was the right thing to do, absolutely the right thing to do, and it has put us in a position where we spent more than our growth in revenues for the year because of the combination of those two things, right? And that's why when you look at this, the amount that bites we have to take out of that beginning balance gets smaller, because this year was a perfect storm with the shorter timber revenue and the greater expenditures.
The greater expenditures were approved before we knew what the timber revenue
The timber was going to be.
because we were right on track until we got the third quarter.
Yep.
So how uncomfortable are you with 4.5 million? You said you're somewhat uncomfortable on a scale of 1 to 10. I mean, are you gonna stay up all night and worry about it, or are you gonna go home and have dinner and come to work tomorrow?
I'll try and come back and convince you to see how much the bad years, what that takes.
I was teasing.
If, you know, I may come back with a little lower, but I may leave it. And
So if you were in charge of everything and didn't have to answer to anybody, what would the number be?
3.1.
That's not happening.
Okay, that's not a
That's
fair
not-
question, I guess.
So,
That was a Debbie Downer answer.
I've been trying not to be. It's frustrating how volatile it is and how we're having to
Yeah.
base our general fund budget on it. We should not be basing our general fund budget on any timber revenues. Those should be set aside, whether it's for big projects, you know, new courthouse, that sort of things. Not.
yeah, so you do have.
Yeah, they do have this. Also in the back it
state
shows
timber
the.
revenue.
Yeah.
If you want to look at it from 2007 up to current, you can see what timber revenue was each year to see the volatility,
low-
your highs and lows, Bill.
What's the lowest it's ever been, like 3 point something?
Lowest on this, no, 2.3.
It's all the way in the back of your book in the pocket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2.3 was
Yeah, I got
our
it.
low point, and that was in 2011, 2012. And our high point, 7.1 was 2019, 2020. Okay, that's for anyone.
And I agree with what you said, Sean, that it would be ideal if timber revenue could go in a stabilization fund or, you know, whatever, contingency fund, but unless we replace that revenue,
Right.
you know, we can't
Well,
even talk about that.
I
today.
said
We can just-
ideally.
Well,
Yes.
but I think that's part of our conversation about tax levies going forward, right? Is that we would like to get off the train of the timber revenue. And so when we looked at a tax levy going forward, is it a tax levy that seeks to replace the timber train?
The volatility of it.
I mean, I think this is part of the conversation that we get to have going forward, is if we're thinking that 4.5 is average, it's probably a very scary number we would have to levy to get to that, because we're currently getting 8 million on our current levy, so you'd have to have half of that again to wipe out the 4.5.
You need the library levy. 65 cents would get you there, that'd be
There you go. I mean,
215.
Yeah, I mean, not taking theirs, but just that's the dollar amount.
That's the
So
dollar.
I think that's part of the conversation that we'll be having in the next year with, Rob Moody, I forget the name of the company.
Marina.
Marina, I always want to say Moody, it's not. So with Marina and Company, it will also be part of probably, because we will do some polling in the community to try to get an idea of what may or may not fly, right? There's a lot to be done,
But you gotta start.
but you gotta start.
Yeah,
And
you
so,
do.
I think that's where we're looking at this year is, can we just hold strong, because we don't know what the future's gonna hold. Can we hold strong where we are, not grow, not add a lot of extra stuff, and try to get through that process? So Sean, what is our gap with what you have identified already? What everyone has asked for, because you did some of the contingency exercise too, right?
I haven't done it in here though.
Okay,
And what I sent you was just for you.
okay.
You're special.
Because I spend so much time in Sean's office,
That's
that's why I'm
Erin-
special.
Erin
I'm a
is
daily
in-
visitor now.
Yes, she is. And it's been fine. Like I said, it just has not been,
I'll have to take a public records request.
Yeah.
All you'll find out is I walked in and out the door,
1.8,
is our goal right now.
yes,
That's what we're out of balance right now as of the moment.
right.
And so you could solve that by pulling it out of the beginning balance.
No, the beginning fund balance is what the beginning fund balance is.
But, so the box the number in the white box is the bite we thought we would have to take.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what you're saying is it would be a $1.8 million bite of the beginning balance if we did not make any additional
Yeah.
changes.
Right,
That's-
sorry,
that
excuse
I
me.
think that was what that was.
Okay.
That's right.
So we had thought when we did this, we were talking about 1.1, with what's on in the books right now, it's 1.8.
Mhm,
And so we
Well-
have a little work yet to do.
mhm.
So Sean, you started this conversation, you said you took a 10-year look back on contingencies within departments.
Mhm.
So what is that number?
I don't have that number off the top of my
Oh.
head.
Okay.
No, I went back, I pulled the 10-year statement of revenue and expenditures to look at their expenditure lines and to see if there's just, 1,000
Things that
here,
are always
5,000
in there,
here,
yeah.
always there and
Yeah.
never been used.
Okay.
So I've started that process of
Okay.
pulling those out.
Okay.
Basically from the contingency, doesn't need to be in two places.
Yeah.
It can be in one.
Yeah.
If they haven't used it, then they're probably not going to use it.
Exactly.
Where a couple people say, I don't know, there's always that there, but we don't use it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's cleaning up that first to see where I'm at. Conversations with department heads I've already been having with them. I mean, I've had several with Sarah. She's digging up revenue
Yeah.
wherever she can.
Yeah.
And having our staff look into that too. So that's been one talk.
So over the past 3 days, I think we've got buy-in from all the department heads. They understand what we're doing,
The contingency part.
contingency
And
part.
I think the other part that this is based on not filling certain existing vacant positions, right? So that's the other thing, is this is built on adding, can I say it out loud? Are we-
I don't know what you're gonna say.
Yeah,
What
but-
is
What
built
you
on?
want to say.
It's built on filling about half of the vacant positions, is that a fair statement? So this is based on filling about half of the vacant positions, not all of the vacant positions. If you fill all of the vacant positions, you run out of money in
Next year.
24, 25. So we're already going to be making some difficult decisions. There are no cuts in this, for anyone who's listening who's starting to panic, there are no cuts anywhere in any of this. But there are, it is in essence, sort of not filling all of the vacant positions that are out there, really looking at what we can get by without in the moment. Which is probably also some of the difference between the budget that you had and this budget as well, that 1.8
Yeah.
instead of 1.1.
That is not in there.
So I guess we could sit here and we could go back through every budget and nitpick and find 50,000 here and 20,000 there, but I think it makes much more sense to say to the treasurer, use your best judgment, and you've produced the last few years a beautiful little piece of paper that had red and black on it. And I thought that was quite helpful because you obviously have the inside track, inside knowledge on this, and you know what needs to be done in terms of keeping the county solvent and from a cash flow perspective. So I would, for my part, I would like to see that again, and then we can massage that at the May meeting if we're uncomfortable with it. And if you can get it to us sooner than later, then we can each take a few minutes and go through it and see if we can have our own opinion when we come back together, rather than sit here and try and nitpick it at $50,000 a pop. But that's just my approach. I think that works, and I got all this stuff managed, get it all on my computer now, and so I can manipulate it a little too. But you know, to me, this shortfall of 1.7 is considerably better than in some previous years, and so it's not what I think we're doing, particularly the board, is they're saying, you know, we could balance this budget here in 5 minutes, but to their everlasting credit, you're looking out 4, 5, 6 years, and to me, that's how you do a budget, because all of us in this room won't be here in 10 or 15 or 20 years or whatever, and well, maybe you two ladies will.
I don't know if I'll be here. I hope I'll still be on this earth, but
Yeah,
I won't be here.
You know, somebody will fill all these chairs eventually, and it would be great to have a practice. I wouldn't call it a position. I call it a practice that the county's been following that recognizes the dynamics of the give and take. It just, you know, and it happens at a dollar at a time, but you have to look at the big picture. And to me, this is a pretty good summary. And assuming the numbers are correct, and they are, and this young lady here did a nice job of putting it on something we can analyze. So I don't know. You haven't weighed in on this. What do you think?
I don't have anything to add to what hasn't already been said, so.
So maybe the way forward is, if Sean, you could do that, if you could continue whatever historical work you're doing, but that's kind of a long-term thing, and then just make a list again and say, okay, we knock this off here, we go ahead with this, and then have your red and black and get us down to where we have a balanced budget without changing the 4.5. I think we all agree that the 4.5 for the next 3 years is a good number.
I hate being outvoted.
I know, you gotta look,
Maybe
because
I know.
we already have 3.5 in revenue stabilization. If we don't get 4.5, we have revenue stabilization funds to utilize to flatten that a bit. So, I mean, I think that's the whole point, and I think that's what we're gonna have to get used to, is revenue stabilization exists to be used and replenished to keep us on a.
So we're not reactionary every time we come
So
into
we're
budget
not
season.
reactionary, exactly.
Has that fund been applied in recent years, revenue stabilization?
I think it was in 14, 15, is that when we had furloughs?
Yeah, it was about that.
13, 14, 15, it
That
was one of those,
shortfall.
yeah.
Yeah, and we don't want to get there. I mean, I think that's the key piece here, is we recognize that this is a significant issue and that we have a lot of work to do. And what the sheriff was pressing on was the right thing to be pressing on. We're just not ready yet to launch, right? We need to do our work on the front end of it so that we can hopefully be successful when we get to the public end of it.
But we're not stalling.
We're not
We're
starting,
starting now.
we're working.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working, but we're just not ready to say, yes, start talking in the public about it. Because we've got work to do to make darn sure that we know that we need it, how much we need, and how we can really show to the public, I think, that we're not asking frivolously.
And what are the appropriate things to be asking for? What are the
Yeah.
most likely to succeed?
Right, what do they want to see?
The cautionary tale here is Josephine County. A couple years ago, they didn't have any deputies. Only person in the sheriff's office was the sheriff. And they didn't have any patrols in Josephine County. 2 years ago, they passed the levy, which was great. So they hired back some deputies. Last November, they went back to renew the levy.
Didn't get it.
Not even close to passing.
Wow.
Really?
Well, that's an argument then for saying maybe the tax base itself, the $1.49, needs to be adjusted. You know, and that's maybe a harder sell because it's permanent, but yeah, the levy roller coaster, you know, the library is never more than 4 years away from not having any money.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they got some reserve, but you know what I'm saying? You failed, if people turned on libraries, you close libraries. I mean, it's, you know, as compared with the county that's gonna be,
No, they can't close. We have to be here.
yeah, yes, you do, there's statutory requirements, but that's why you have a tax base as compared with serial levies and bond levies.
Yep.
But I don't think we can go to the voters and ask to just raise the tax base because of ballot measure 5.
No, I think you can adjust that if by vote, can't you? Maybe I'm wrong.
We have the experts in the room. I didn't think we could adjust it.
The permanent rate, as far as I understand, cannot be changed.
That's
Not
my
even- Not
understanding
even by
also.
voters?
At a state level, it would have to be done at the
Oh,
state level.
okay, well, then
Yeah.
I'll take that back, then that
Yeah,
takes
our
that off the
options
table
are
pretty much.
Too bad, yeah, too bad. Yeah, yeah.
Well, in that case, then you have serial levies and then a.
That's why we have
capital
so
bond.
many.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because that's our only tool that seems to be available to us for raising revenue. I mean, I say only unless you're gonna go for a food tax, or you're gonna go, you know, the other things that,
Seasonal food
again,
tax.
we've, well, and it's even been tried as a seasonal
Yeah.
food tax and still failed.
Yeah.
It was tried as a retail tax, not on anything that, you know, not your food and your rent and your utilities. It was none of that. It was just like what tourists buy, and that one
Yeah.
failed in another community.
Cannon Beach put in the food tax last year, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Only passed though by 2 or 3 votes. It was
Barely
really
passed.
close. Ashland has had one for a long time, and
That's
it's,
true,
I think it's 7% or something
yeah.
like that.
And Yahats, yeah.
Yahats,
So I think that's
Yeah.
part of what the polling and those community conversations are likely gonna be looking at, right? Is what does our electorate think is they'd be most amenable to? We're gonna be doing that research to figure out what do we think? What is the right approach?
What the sheriff's been talking about, which I appreciate his logic, is it would be more, because the visitors to Tillamook County tax public safety so much, it might very well be more amenable to voters to say, you know, we need to get this revenue from the visitors who are causing us to have to do this excess work. Because if we, you know, if we were in Eastern Oregon and we just, our sheriff's office just took care of our 27,000 people, it would be a different story, you know? So I think that's a smart approach, and we just have to figure out how to do it. Would it be going back to, you know, again, like Bill tried to do with legislation to change the TLT?
And that has drawbacks too, because look at all the good things we're doing with the TLT.
Totally, yeah, but
It's their
TLT
time.
also continues to grow.
Continues to grow, another,
I just think we're gonna keep
Yeah.
getting turned away based on the history and based on the conversations I've had with the folks at Orla specifically, who will tell you DOJ has laid it out in law what it can be used for, and that's just that. So I think we're gonna keep beating our head against the wall. I just think it can't be, it can't be the only strategy.
my strategy this last time I was going to do it is I had the cities involved and I had all the sheriff's organizations were gonna come in and join in on this thing. And thought maybe if we got enough people, we could make it happen, but COVID hit and
Yeah.
I really don't have that political type drive anymore.
Yeah,
We'll
but
just send
something
Aaron out.
else, yeah.
I've been poking at that one and have gotten every door slammed in my face. I don't think it's the best approach that is most likely to get us anywhere. I invite everyone to keep fighting and trying, but
Yeah.
I just don't think it's the one. And the other thing is any money you get gets split 70-30 because that's the current law as well. So you're gonna have the entire thing rewritten because there was, you know, we'll just increase it. Well, you increase it, whatever you get, you're only gonna get 30% of it. The other 70 is still going to.
They're not gonna
to-
break that 70-30 split. They got it and they're not giving it up.
Nope. So I appreciate the idea. Again, everyone that I've been trying to poke at that with, AOC is like, there's no way, you know? And these are people who understand the legislature and how it works. So, great idea. The bill died that was introduced, I don't know that even got a hearing.
Who, my bill?
No, the one that Josh was talking about this year that.
Mine
that
did,
was-
but Haas killed it.
Yeah, this one, there was one,
Or has.
literally one in there this year that was specifically for public safety that
safety.
increased and allowed you to do additional TLT, because I think we're already at the max allowed, right? So this allowed you to increase your max and then allowed it to be specifically for public safety.
Still at a 70-30 split, or,
I believe so.
yeah.
So it died. So I think for us, we gotta look locally.
Gotta
We gotta look at what we have more control over in terms of finding a solution to this.
I
Or
think
we're
we have
not
to do
gonna.
both. I think we have to do both, yeah. Yeah, because it's not, you know, we all know, sitting in this room, that it doesn't make sense the way it is now. And, you know, I don't know if it'll change in our lifetimes, or in the next 5 years, or 10 years, or whatever, but eventually, it's going to be obvious to more people that this doesn't work, you know, and eventually, if people keep working on it, it'll change. But I agree that we need to do both. I see you rolling your eyes, but it's
No,
5 o'clock.
head for Salem. Go down to Salem, start beating your head against some walls and some doors, and see what you think. I've done, even in my 2 years, enough of that to feel like that's just a closed door.
I've often felt that going to Salem's a waste of time.
Yeah, but we're gonna have to figure out how we do this locally, you know, or we're not gonna get it done. So lots of work on our plate to get there, to try to get to some place where we don't drop below the red line in 3 years, because then we don't have a choice. Then we have to start paring back, and I don't think we want to get to the 3rd year and then suddenly start paring back.
No.
Okay, so are we clear on where we're headed? There'll be something out in the next 2 or 3 weeks that shows some pluses and minuses. You're nodding your head, you can do that. And we know where we are with this. We know the budget can be balanced this year, and we'll stay with the 4.5 million on the revenue forecast, and hopefully that'll come in higher and put some money in the revenue stabilization. And it doesn't look like that will need to be used this year to balance because of our beginning cash balance. So what else do we need to decide today?
I don't think there's anything else today.
So we meet again on what day is it, May something?
May 10th.
May 10, okay, so that isn't all that far
It
away.
is not that far away, less than a month.
Stay out of my office then.
And
Stay out
I,
of your office. I'm there to help. John, I'm there to help.
Did you hear that?
I'll let you know when you can come down. How's that?
Stay out of my office.
So after that, then the process, just for people, if anybody's listening, after we meet again on May 10th for an hour, 2 or 3, and hash out what we need to actually balance the budget, it goes on to the Board of Commissioners, and they will meet at a regular meeting in June to make any final adjustments and adopt it for the fiscal year that starts July 1. If for some reason there are changes that I believe exceed 10%, which is not likely, they have to reconvene this committee, but I don't know that that's ever happened recently, so, but that's the system in Oregon, and it's not a bad system because anybody can come and listen and be heard, and when you see us in the grocery store, well, you can pounce upon us and tell us what you think.
Just don't throw anything at us.
There may be a supplemental budget, because I think I may have one fund that is more than a 10% increase, but that'll be in June.
Okay, and the commissioners will deal with that one.
no,
Oh, we have to deal with that. The reason you have it is because it exceeds
10%.
10%, right?
Yeah,
Got it.
and it'll be in person or virtual, so
Okay, well, try to give us more than an hour's notice if you can.
well, I have to notice it, so I will definitely do that.
Okay, anything else then to come before this committee? If not, I'll thank you all as the chair. I think we've done 3 days' worth of work for the public, and so thank you all, and we'll gather again in about a month. Meeting adjourned at 5:05.
All right, thank you, Doug.